Hello, my dear friends. How is it going? Welcome. Thank you for joining me here. I'm Mari Thurger, and today I'm here to try to briefly explain a few things about Galdr, because very recently a patron of mine sent me a video from Instagram of a young woman who makes all sorts of claims concerning Old Norse religion and belief systems, Viking spirituality, as she says, quite the pseudoscientific or pseudoscience new age talk for anyone who seeks to know more about these belief systems but doesn't actually want to, or doesn't have the time and or will or the patience to study the actual sources, be those literary, historical and archaeological sources, and prefers a quick view on something fantastical as an escapism to feed one's own wishes about some glimpses of ancestry of which they know nothing about and don't want to know, because the goal is to be appealing to the person who hungers for something special and not truly the eagerness to obtain knowledge on these subjects. So the patron in question sent me a video of this young woman living in Sweden. She's from England. She makes a lot of claims, and the patron was very confused, obviously, and for good reasons, and had several questions about this, especially concerning Galdr and concerning this young woman's claims on Galdr. I'm not going to tell you the name of this young woman for two main reasons. I have no wish to start online feuds because I have neither the time nor the patience for it. I'm a grown man with a lot on my plate already, and because I don't remember her name. But I'm sure many of you probably already know her if you are on Instagram and seeking about these subjects. So she made this claim, which is nothing new actually, as this is pseudoscience and gibberish that pops up from time to time. She says, and I quote, "The Vikings knew how to manipulate reality through sound, and we are finally learning that they were right." And she goes on to repeat, to present images that mean absolutely nothing at all and are totally out of context. And in the description of this video, she says the exact same thing, but manipulation of reality through vibrations. And then she continues. They used Galdr as a special type of chanting. If you chant the right words with the right tone, reality shifts. This means nothing at all. And then she goes on to point out that Odin, the god Odin himself, knew 18 Galdr songs, and on that account I have made a video precisely on that, and things are not as simple as that, but I'm not going to repeat what was already said. So if you have the time, obviously, please watch that previous video on that subject of the 18 Galdr songs. And then, of course, the same use of words, the same kind of talk. Speaking of Indo-Europeans, throwing in there Indo-Europeans as always, always bringing about this term Indo-European whenever people want to really give that idea that it is very old and ancestral and therefore true. But then they all talk about things that not only are recent ideas, recent inventions, but also ideas born within very recent occultic circles that completely invent shit up to pose as these authorities on the spiritual, to aggrandize their ego, and because, well, spirituality is a great source of money if you feed the desperate with the illusions they want to hear, right? People will pay for this shit. At best, what she claims is UPG, at best, unverifiable personal knowledge, right? The important point that I really want to underline here is that when it comes to spirituality and religion and other aspects of life, belief is not the same as fact. Anyone is free or should be free to believe in what they want. When it comes to this historical reality of the subjects I speak about in this channel, at this point, I don't really care anymore about your personal beliefs on it, right? Your beliefs are your own. I care about the facts. Personal beliefs don't change facts. So it's totally all right if this young woman believes in these things. Her mind is her own. What's not all right is expressing these personal beliefs as facts, as historical facts, as if they were true. Because what she says is a belief, not a fact. What she claims is not supported by the surviving evidences and all the countless scientific studies in the past almost 100 years concerning these subjects. I mean, there's a big difference, a huge difference between personal beliefs and historical facts. And to be honest, I don't even think she actually believes in this stuff herself, or at least I kind of hope so for her sake. Otherwise, it's just another Delulu girl on the internet, which is kind of sad because I've seen more of her content, obviously, and it's more like information purely as a work of fiction, solely meant for entertainment purposes, because this sells, fantasy sells, spirituality sells, and her whole vibe and expression is mostly the kind of talk we often hear from new age spiritual gurus creating content specifically for Americans, actually. So either for entertainment or truly a personal belief, it doesn't matter. It's dangerous because people tend to mistake pseudoscience as actual science, right? And she even goes on as to compare Galdr with the singing bowls in Buddhism because of the vibrations of sound and whatnot. I mean, good gods, that's just shit for tourists. And the Western society made up all that crap, again, due to pseudoscience and new age religious beliefs inventing all sorts of things from what sounds exotic, but people don't truly understand what it is. And that's because it sells, because people don't understand it and find it very exotic and special. I mean, singing bowls are not used for sound therapy and whatever else people made up. That's used in Western society stores some new age spiritualist middle-aged chick opened, or in workshops to learn about Buddhism, which has absolutely nothing to do with actual Buddhism, but a Western interpretation of Buddhism to sell the spiritual to those who are desperate to find alternatives to fix all sorts of ailments and struggles in their lives, right? I mean, fuck it. You know what? Let me try to find this woman again. Right, the name she uses is Alvi Gunilla. I'm sick and tired of these people, and we have to call them out at some point and end this farce. Anyway, I've already made a video concerning Galdr. Again, if you have the time, please watch that video. It's longer, a lot more detailed, and bibliography at the end of that video. Be that as it may, I'll briefly touch on a few points again concerning Galdr, just as a reminder, but I do advise you to watch or rewatch that previous video. So, Galdr, as it comes described in the sources and in comparison with other sources of knowledge, was a form of magic initially. It's actually hard to determine what Galdr truly was, but by all accounts seems to have been a specific form of sorcery focusing on a type of high-pitched singing. As I've pointed out on that previous video, there's a curious aspect to the etymology of this word, as Galdr has two relatives today, both in the modern Swedish verb gala, which is used for the crowing of a rooster, and the Portuguese word galo, which is a rooster. It's a high-pitched vocalization, right? So, the sources tell us that Galdr songs were pleasing to the ear. Snorre, in Hautatal, speaks of the incantation meter called Galdralag, used occasionally in Eddic poems, which suggests a special rhythm to Galdr. Even though Galdr was pleasing to the ear, it could also be used for destructive aspects, right? Unlike what the previous young woman I've mentioned has said, and other people, obviously, this quite the romantic aspect to it, Galdr wasn't just used for healing aspects and other beneficial things. There's also a great emphasis on the destructive power of the tongue. Galdr was also employed to curse, to induce sickness of all sorts on both humans and animals. It was also used to kill, not just like killing someone through sickness or whatever, but directly cause death. There's one such example, for instance, in the Laxdila saga, in which a pleasant song incantation is performed with the intention of killing a young boy. We shall get to this source further ahead in this video. Moving on. Galdr was used for a variety of aspects, that's the point. Galdr occurs in a variety of contexts. Unfortunately, Galdr as a type of magic began to fade by the end of the Scandinavian Iron Age, the so-called Viking Age, which makes it extremely difficult to understand how it was used, how the expression of vocalization was in fact employed. The great majority of the sources on Galdr, the written sources, are quite late, already from the Icelandic Middle Ages, as we notice that Galdr progressively has become a distinct form of sung poetry for man. But more details on that on the previously mentioned video. That's not the point, doesn't matter now. The point here is that there are a few mentions of Galdr that truly gives us the indication that it was a form of magic still used until at least the end of the Scandinavian Iron Age. And then it changed. We shall get to that. Galdr is seen as a particular element in a form of magic, as in being the expression of the wish that one wants to express in the world. In other words, it's possible that the Galdr was primarily part of a kind of animistic spell. In other words, the expression of the wish and not the ritual itself. In other words, a key element of traditional folk magic, witchcraft. In the Middle Ages, the term had already become the general term for magic and or witchcraft. But it seems to have started as part of an operative magical practice, which is the expression of intention. In other words, a spell. We shall also get to that in a moment, right? But it's truly no coincidence that the term Galdr in the Middle Ages continued to be used as one of the generic words for witchcraft, long into post-medieval times, actually. Anyway, one important aspect concerning Old Norse and later Nordic forms of magic and sorcery, that's where I want to get, are the songs and chants we know of. One of the most interesting elements of the seiðr performance, seiðr being a type of semi-shamanic performance, mostly for prophetic purposes, of which I have talked about in several past videos. It's not important now, but as I was saying, an important element of seiðr performance is the so-called vardlokur. I have also talked about this extensively on a previous video, and with bibliography again, if you have the time to watch and listen to that video, which has a lot more details on this, on vardlokur. But I would like to make a quick reminder here. It's in Eirik's saga Rauda that we have the only detailed account of vardlokur, which makes it clear that it was a spoken or sung expression by a circle of female assistants to the seeress, to the prophetess, the vulva, the seiðr performer. So vardlokur, by all accounts, seems to be a song or incantation, spoken or sung words to call upon the aiding spirits to lock, to bind, to entice the aiding or possibly the tutelary spirit. I've explained all of this in that previously mentioned video, right? So moving on, vardlokur seems to have been a means of summoning spirits. And this can be for a variety of reasons, obviously, but it was a sung or spoken performance in the act of seiðr. Vardlokur may be the exact same thing as the seiðleiti we also find in the sources, seiðr songs. Just like Galdr, the sources tell us that it was sweet, pleasant to the ear, even when also expressed with ill intentions. Remember back there, I've mentioned the Lextila saga, in which a singing incantation, which is very pleasing to the ear, is performed to kill a young boy. It's not the vocal expression that kills the boy. It is the pleasantness of the incantation that lures the boy to his death. This is the important point here. Galdr, seiðr, varlokur, all of these vocalized expressions in the form of song are pleasant to the ear and have the function to lure something, to summon, to entice, to catch the attention and attract, seduce. And all of them seem to have had a high-pitched melody to them. And the most equivalent we have to that has survived into our days, possibly, are both the lokrop, in modern Swedish, which means a call to attract, precisely, and kuning, to call upon a cow. Cow call, both being herd calls, high-pitched songs. I mean, similar to the Finnish tietäjä, chants, a wise person, a seiðr, a tietäjä, who uses chants to heal or prevent illness, but also a great deal of helping in farming, calling upon animals and spirits for aid or some other beneficial aspect. The use of incantations to call upon helpers, such as the dead, other spirits, gods, even Jesus Christ, the Virgin Mary, or animal spirits, and so on and so forth. These are sung incantations that call upon names of power in order to summon such entities to aid, to help in the magic performance. I've talked about this more recently when I've compared Christian prayers with witchcraft incantations or enchantments in a recent video. It's the same thing, right? We still see this in traditional folk magic, popular magic, witchcraft. The use of incantations, enchantments, song, that include all sorts of names of power, the summoning of powerful entities, spirits that can aid in the magical performance. This is still noticeable in Christianity, particularly in Catholicism and in traditional folk magic. And speaking of Nordic history, which is what we are doing here right now, this is still noticeable in trolldom, witchcraft. Both in Christianity and in traditional folk magic, psalms are used. These are incantations, these are prayers, these are now spoken incantations, calling upon names of power to be present and to aid, expressing the intention and expressing it into the world to be manifested. The word psalm originates from the Greek word psalmos, meaning song sung to a harp or music played on stringed instruments. So Galdr, seiðr, varlokur, tietäjä, chants, these were all sung incantations, most likely, with the same structure as prayers, right? The same structure as spells in witchcraft, which with time the singing part was left aside, but the structure is the same, invoking names of power, expressing the wish and setting it loose, let's say, upon the world, with the help of the spirit entities that were called upon to aid in order to manifest the intention of the spell. The origins of Galdr is most likely a high-pitched song with the objective to call upon names of power, gods of all sorts, spirits, ancestors, and so on and so forth, in order to aid in the magical performance. In other words, Galdr is a spell. Galdr is not this pseudoscience mixing New Age gibberish and quantum physics, the manipulation of reality itself through vibration. Galdr was the spell work, the spell itself, the spell part of the magical performance, the vocalized part in form of high-pitched song of the seiðr performance. I mean, people want so much to make these subjects something highly complex, to pass on this idea that they are on to something super obscure. Only they have figured it out and no one else. They are the holders of the truth, and people in the past were on to something as well, this conspiracy, and our ancestors were so much more advanced and spiritually grounded and whatnot, to sell you all this bullshit, because this bullshit sells indeed. And that they actually end up making a mockery of the ancestral past and our ancestors and the actual historical past. Galdr was popular magic. Galdr was an expression as part of witchcraft performance. I mean, if you don't like the word witchcraft for some reason, then Galdr was a singing expression of performative magic, which we find all over within animistic belief systems, and witchcraft being very much a performative or pragmatic behavior within animism. Now, after almost 9 years of making content for YouTube, at this point I truly don't care anymore in what you believe in. It makes absolutely no difference when it comes to the facts of history and of the expressions of human societies throughout history. I've always been here to give you information, and whatever you do with that information is up to you. But I mean, just try to protect yourselves from further feeding delusions and psychosis. The real world is just as magical and wonderful once we free ourselves from delusion and embrace the reality and the truth of things. I mean, just because Galdr isn't the manipulation of reality through vibrations doesn't make it less special. The reality of it is, as we know from the sources and from comparison with other similar realities and human expressions towards the spiritual and the supernatural, is just as special in its own way. And for those neo-pagans, for instance, who seek to bring back these performances in your spiritualities, it's not pseudoscience that will help you to do so. It is knowledge on what these things were truly about. And with that knowledge, we can better express it in our lives according to our needs in terms of spirituality. So, my dear friends, thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, tack för idag. Thanks for today. Obrigado por hoje. Until we meet again, my dear friends.